Warlord. Opening 5-dimensional full introduction. www.zhaozhuyuan.com. Come and read more of my works on our website. https://www.zhaozhuyuan.com. Chapter 1. Departure. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. The river raised its head, and the dazzling sunlight shone through the gaps between its 5 fingers, shining on his cheek. At the end of the memory of the river, the water cup poured and half a bottle of mineral water poured onto the computer. The originally bulging battery immediately made a sizzling sound, and the computer screen suddenly turned black. He smelled a pungent burning smell. Even worse, his hands were on the keyboard. The strong electric current stimulates his body, causing pain and convulsions. He immediately fell into a coma. Open your eyes again, the fiery red sun rises from one end of the sky, the morning dew evaporates, and the breath is the fresh scent of grass leaves and roadside tung tree leaves. On both sides are houses made of soil and stones, low and earthy yellow old houses covered with clusters of thatch on the top. There are many people on the roadside wearing strange clothes, and most men are wearing waist jackets, lined jackets, and horse pants. Most women wear waist jackets, dresses, horse pants. Their clothes have dim colors and are not as bright as modern clothes. They look gray and very simple. 3 question marks popped up in his head. Shouldn't he be taken to the infirmary? What is this place? Immediately after, a familiar semi-transparent system panel appeared at the corner of his eye. Name. I didn't steal a girl, a foreign traveler, military. 100 physical fitness. 100 brave. 100 spirit. 100 charm. 100. Before being electrified, Jiang Lu was playing a military strategy in management game, Fantasy Continent War 3. He is creating a character, entering his name by hand, and I didn't steal a girl. The age is set to be 16 years old. Then I started the Wind Spirit Moon Shadow modifier, slightly adding a few attributes. Full value of all attributes, Pentagram Warrior. This panel is the game's property bar. The river instantly realized that he might have crossed over. There is an introduction box below the attributes column that describes his life. Introduction. I didn't steal a girl, a traveler who wandered from the east to the west. You have exceptional talent and strong strength. But you have no reputation and are unknown. You need more time to prove your abilities to others, become a mercenary/robber/lord, or something else. Complete tasks and improve reputation. This vast world awaits you to explore, discover, and write a legend that belongs to me, the girl I never stole. Jiang Lu extended his hand, with a physique of 100 and bravery. He felt his body filled with explosive force, as if he could easily crush stones. His body also became exceptionally agile, leaping forward and feeling like he could touch the clouds in the sky. With a spiritual power of 100, the river's brain is unprecedentedly clear. His past experiences flashed through his mind like a movie, and he could even press the pause button to zoom in on a detail in his memory and observe something he hadn't noticed before. He has an unimaginable memory. The charm attribute of 100, Jiang Lu's expression of contemplation, can't it be that he is now a handsome guy? His gaze focused on the surroundings, and on the roadside, many people's footsteps stopped. A considerable number of them were women, their gaze focused on him, from the old lady with white hair to the girl who had just learned how to walk, staring at him with distracted eyes. Before crossing the river, I was a programmer. He is not very talkative and has an introverted personality. Besides work, he often stays at home and is a typical otaku. He has always been a little transparent in the crowd, and this is the first time he has attracted so much attention. Jiang Lu thought of the game setting, in which the charm of an ordinary person is around 30. Under normal circumstances, the limit of charm attributes is 70. Over 70, must possess some special skills. For example, leadership qualities, emperors, heroes, saints, and chosen ones. At this point, charm cannot be simply described as handsome, beautiful, or stunning. Personal image will rise to the level of ethnicity, territory, country, and religion, becoming a symbol of uniting people's hearts, inspiring soldiers, and preaching. Extraordinary charm. It's hard to imagine what his charm value of 100 would look like in the eyes of others at this moment. He quickly lowered his head, half covering his cheek, and walked forward with a stiff scalp. The river is not flowing because of fear of being noticed. In fact, the feeling of being noticed is not bad, and he feels a little happy in his heart. However, some people's gaze made him feel scared. Especially for women, this is not the normal way to look at men. They keep their eyes fixed and their gaze moves with him. Some eyes were blank, their throats made swallowing movements, and the corners of their mouths flashed with sparkling saliva. Their eyes rolled and twitched, unsure of what they were thinking. Jiang Lu suddenly understood in his heart how it feels to describe a man looking at a woman as explicit, lewd, or even lewd. Those women of appropriate age looked at him like wolves and tigers, as if trying to strip him naked. He used to disapprove of a saying. Boys should protect themselves when they go out. I suddenly realized the meaning of this sentence now. He walked not far ahead. It was a bustling street with many street vendors sitting on the ground and setting up stalls. They are selling their products. Jiang Lu walked up to a vendor, where several masks were placed in one corner of the stall. He picked up an iron mask and wore it on his face. The semi-transparent attribute bar at the corner of Jiang Liu's eyes instantly changes its charm from 100 to 60, 100. 60 is his current charm value. In order to highlight the authenticity of the game, all aspects of Fantasy Continent War 3 have been adjusted according to the actual situation. For example, if a monk is skilled in bare-handed combat and wields a sharp sword, his martial arts attributes will be greatly reduced, and throwing away his weapon will restore normal values. Similarly, a legendary swordsman without a sword may not have a high level of bravery. But once equipped with a sword, the level of bravery will instantly skyrocket. Jiang Lu wears a good mask, which is the gaming experience he gained from his previous works. The mask has the effect of covering charm. If he creates a character with extremely low charm value, wearing a mask and covering the face will instantly elevate his charm by several levels. On the contrary, if the charm value is high, wearing a mask will reduce the charm. Jiang Lu raised his head and wore a mask to observe the surroundings. The woman who had been staring straight at him just now and couldn't walk quickly returned to normal. He breathed a sigh of relief and lowered his head to inquire, "May I ask, how much does this mask cost?" Jiang Lu speaks Latin, which was the official language of ancient Rome and the most influential language in Europe before the Middle Ages. Zhaozuiyuan.com is considered the precursor to languages such as Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, and French. There are many things in this world that look like the world he traveled through before. He is located in the West, where Latin is the most widely used language and the official language and medium of communication for the vast majority of surrounding countries. Jiang Lu does not speak Latin, and the characters he creates have no memory of Latin. However, the spiritual power of 100 endows him with unimaginable memory and understanding, and the physical constitution of 100 endows him with powerful 5 senses. He observed the surroundings and quickly understood the meaning of their conversation through the gestures, expressions, and reactions of passers-by. Brain analysis, memory, and imitation. He quickly learned how to converse with merchants. He himself felt unbelievable, but he did indeed do it. The merchant looked up with a friendly smile on his lips and said, "Sir, this mask really suits you. The price is 2 shield coins." Shield currency is a commonly used currency in Western countries. The material of shield coins is brass, also known as copper shield coins or copper coins. The higher level currency is the emblem coin, a coin made of silver, also known as the silver emblem coin or silver coin. The most advanced currency is the crown, made of gold, also known as the gold crown or gold coin. 3 currencies represent 3 classes. Shield coins symbolize soldiers, emblem coins symbolize nobles with family emblems, and crown coins represent kings. 1 gold equals 10 silver, and 1 silver equals 100 copper. A new semi-transparent panel appeared at the corner of Jiang Lu's eyes, with numbers marked in the lower right corner. Immediately after, 2 small copper coins appeared on his right hand as if by magic. This panel is the loot backpack of the system. He just tried and can withdraw currency, but cannot deposit it. His initial currency for entering the game is 100 copper. Chapter 2. Southern Wilderness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push, the river wears masks and walks on the streets. A cheap hotel costs about 5 copper shield coins per day, and renting a room is much cheaper, but it does not support daily payment. Adding 3 meals, the remaining money didn't give him too much time to adapt to this world. He needs to find a new job. Jiang Lu showed a thoughtful expression, raised his right hand, and placed it on his mask. Perhaps he could rely on his face to make a living and find a beautiful rich woman. He shook his head and quickly rejected the bold idea. He doesn't like to rely on others for a living, and he doesn't have much experience with women. I usually communicate with my mother, and occasionally with my grandmother. What else? He remembers that there was only a cleaning lady among the female employees of the company. Other jobs. Jiang Lu is a bit distressed. He used to work as a programmer, sitting in front of a computer every day programming. He has no work experience other than that of a programmer. Moreover, this is a very chaotic world. The river gradually learned some information from the population along the way. He did not communicate with anyone. However, his mind is exceptionally bright now. It's not just about quickly learning to communicate with others, what passers-by say, entering their ears. He can memorize, classify, and process information like AI software. Jiang Lu quickly screened out the information he needed. He is currently located in the southern wilderness of the game, also known as the Ownerless Zone. The game map of Fantasy Continent War is very similar to reality, with the corresponding areas of the southern wilderness being Romania, Croatia, and Greece, which are surrounded by this area. The Balkan Peninsula in the real world. This is the border area between the chaotic camp and the orderly camp. The southern wasteland and the northwestern region are one of the 2 most powerful countries of human lineage, the Holy Empire. Corresponding to most regions of Germany and France in reality. To the west of the southern wilderness lies the Confederation, corresponding to Italy. The east and south of the southern wilderness are the territories of various chaotic camps, who often invade the southern wilderness. In the past, the Southern Confederation was called the Southern Kingdom. The southern wasteland is known as the Ownerless Zone. The Southern Kingdom entered an unknown territory and occupied this area. During this period, a powerful orc force entered the Ownerless Zone from the east and engaged in a prolonged war with the Southern Kingdoms. The war ended and the Southern Kingdom suffered a disastrous defeat, forcing them to withdraw from the Ownerless Zone. This area has also been known as the Southern Wilderness since then. The war also resulted in the killing of the kings of the Southern Kingdoms, and various family forces within the country engaged in civil war, splitting into various principalities. Later, in order to prevent the invasion of the Holy Empire, the great lords of the Southern Kingdom sat at the negotiating table, forming an alliance and dividing the territories ruled by the major families. The Southern Kingdom became the Confederation. The Holy Empire also entered the southern wilderness. However, during their reign, they also did not seek justice. The chaotic camp invades every few years. There is also a chaotic force in the south and north of the wilderness, dressed in the guise of an orderly camp. The Wood Elves. They are crazy environmentalists, from east, west, north, south, and every 3 years, they choose a lucky spot to plant trees. The full name of the activity is hunting. They scatter seeds along the way and kill the lives of humans, orcs, goblins, and other creatures they encounter. Their bodies are buried in the ground and used as fertilizer to nourish the barren soil. During the reign of the Holy Empire, he was very lucky to be continuously selected by the Wooden Elves. They had no choice but to take the Wooden Elves, suffered heavy losses, and were forced to withdraw from the southern wasteland. Due to various issues, there is still no unified force in the southern wilderness. Various races and factions engaged in a chaotic struggle. On the human side, the first choice for exiles who commit serious crimes in the Southern Federation and the Holy Empire is to flee to the southern wilderness. Those nobles who hold noble status but do not have territories, the unclaimed land of the southern wasteland is a place to realize their ambitions. Many powerful people entered the southern wilderness, occupied an area, and claimed to be princes. In fact, the areas they control may not yet be as large as the barons. In the independent prince's territory of the southern wilderness, the survival time usually does not exceed 3 years. The competition here is very fierce, with human exiles including bandit leaders, witches, and ambitious nobles. Other races include orcs, ogres, and drowned pirates. Occasionally, there are wooden elves passing by who want to plant small saplings and search for fertilizers. This is also in line with the reality of the Balkan Peninsula. The European powder keg. Jiang Lu feels that his future is bleak and he wants a stable job. Time travel is not entirely a good thing for him. He also received an important piece of intelligence, which is now in the year 1101 of the imperial calendar. This is the script from the beginning of Fantasy Continent War 3. The game consists of multiple scripts, each with a different legendary hero. They are optional characters, and players can play any role. Of course, you can also create your own character. Jiang Lu chose a self-built character. Shortly after the script begins, in the year 1102 of the imperial calendar, the Wood Elves will descend from the north and enter the southern wilderness for tree planting activities. Wood Elves do not have males, they will be attracted by powerful or charismatic males, capture their territory, and create small wood elves. After pregnancy, they will kill their favorite man and bury him under their favorite tree as fertilizer. He is located in the territory of Prince Bia, in the northern wilderness of the south. The wood elves are invading south, and this place will inevitably be visited by them. Jiang Lu noticed his attribute panel. The charm of 100, if his mask falls off and is seen by the wooden elf. His portrait will definitely be posted in the Tavern of the Wood Elves, becoming the preferred choice for the Wood Elf search team. He is the only bug in the world that doesn't rely on any skills and has 100 charms. He is currently poor, homeless, and in a very bad situation. And it is expected that the future will become even worse. Zhaozuiyuan.com. The river was wandering aimlessly, and a noisy place caught his attention. He looked up and saw a 2-story building, the Mercenary Tavern in the city. Jiang Lu's eyebrows furrowed. Mercenaries in the southern wilderness are not like adventurers in other games. Their daily tasks include clearing drainage pipes, repelling evil goblins and orcs, and searching for mysterious treasures. Most of them are butchers stained with blood. In the southern wilderness, the income of mercenaries mainly comes from 3 sources: war, plunder, and slavery. The situation in the southern wilderness is very chaotic, with wars occurring almost every moment. Mercenaries are like hunting dogs searching for the scent of war. Some mercenaries have a powerful force that can help one side control the situation on the battlefield, and the most convincing way to get their help is with shiny gold coins. Often, the other party offers a higher price, and the mercenary may even bite back at the owner who previously hired them. Predation is a better explanation. When encountering some weak forces, cover your mouth with a cloth strip, and most mercenaries don't mind making a guest appearance as a robber. Kill the useless people directly. Some strong men, beautiful women, and mercenaries will be sold to slave traders. Jiang Lu showed a thoughtful expression and told him rationally. In the current situation, mercenaries are the best choice. To survive in the southern wilderness, he must learn how to fight. He has a physique of 100 and is brave. But he doesn't know any martial arts skills. If he is surrounded by wooden elves, even if he has full attribute values and cannot fight, he may still be killed. Moreover, mercenaries are high-paying professions. He earns money and can continue southward, or enter the empire and southern kingdoms, far away from the forest where the wood elves live. Chapter 3. Mercenaries. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Jiang Lu chose from the heart and walked into the mercenary tavern in the city. The river pushed open the door, and a strong aroma of alcohol mixed with sweat and a faint smell of blood rushed into his nose. The environment inside the tavern is dim, with only a few windows not receiving enough sunlight, and the interior is filled with a damp moisture, or rather a smell of alcohol. The naked man held a rum glass and cursed profusely. The skinny man was telling vulgar jokes, with one hand placed in the chest of the woman next to him. The waitress, holding a wine glass, walked back and forth among these mercenaries, occasionally being wiped off by men with a charming smile on her lips. This is the mercenary tavern led by the Prince of Bia, chaotic, disorderly, and filled with dirty desires. The river instinctively took a step back. He felt like a poor little sheep, breaking into a bloodthirsty wolf pack. But he still mustered up the courage to walk in. His brain quickly processes the information he hears. Some vulgar language makes him feel nauseous, and the seductive cries of women make him feel uncomfortable. The river frowned and looked around with its eyes. He noticed one of the men with his gaze, froze for a moment, and a surprised look appeared in his eyes. A monk. The man's head is very round and bright, reflecting the sunlight through the window. His surroundings are slightly brighter. The man has a round face and big ears, with a beard that can cover his neck just enough. His waist is over 1 meter wide, and his body is very tall and robust. He was wearing a dark yellow monk robe, holding a string of prayer beads in his hand, and closing his eyes to rest. The man noticed the gaze of the river and immediately opened his eyes. The two of them looked at each other, and the man stood up and slowly walked towards him. Jiang Lu looked up, and the man was nearly 2 meters tall, a head taller than him. Someone noticed the two of them and immediately showed a keen eye for the show. Jiang Lu realized from the gloating eyes of these people that men are very difficult to deal with and are very likely to have a hot temper, hitting people for reasons like, "Why are you looking at me?" He couldn't help but take a step back, feeling very unconfident in his heart. He had a fight with someone last time in junior high school. He quickly calmed down his fear and asked, "From Changnan?" Changnan is a foreign term for ancient China, which is a transliteration of China, meaning porcelain. Changnan is the place where porcelain comes from. Similarly, there is Celis, the place where sea came from. Fantasy Continent War, naming the most powerful country in the east as Changnan. The two most powerful countries in the human faction currently are the Holy Empire and Changnan. Jiang Lu speaks Chinese. The man immediately showed a sudden expression and asked, "You also came from the Golden Road?" The Golden Road is a game mechanism of the Changnan faction, which is the ancient Silk Road. Through the Golden Road, silk and porcelain can be sold at an equal weight or even more than the price of gold in the Southern Federation and Holy Empire, earning a profit of over 10 times. Returning to the east, the rare treasures of the Holy Empire and the Southern Federation can also be sold at extremely high prices. However, most of the monsters in the chaotic camp along the Golden Road, and very few caravans can cross the Golden Road, let alone return to Changnan. Jiang Lu hesitated for a moment and nodded. The character created by Jiang Lu is set against the backdrop of Changnan people who wander from the east to the southern wasteland. The man reached out his hand and a friendly smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. But due to his fierce face, he appeared somewhat terrifying. Song Hu, also known as Hueda, comes from the Shaolin Brotherhood. The Shaolin Brotherhood is a faction in Changnan, with the prototype being Shaolin Temple. Why use this title instead of Shaolin Temple? Because there is a sentence before the game, this work is purely fictional and has nothing to do with real characters, groups, or countries. There are no real-life social organization names used in the game. Encountering a fellow villager in an unfamiliar place, Jiang Lu's mood jumped with joy and he reached out his hand, Jiang Lu. Jiang Lu's heart was filled with expectations, and the other party was likely from a powerful caravan. If he could return to the east, it would be much safer than staying in the west all along. The southern wilderness is dangerous, and there are also many explosive points within the Southern Kingdom and Holy Empire. The name of the game is Fantasy Continent War. There is no conflict. Where did the war come from? Compared to others, although Changnan is chaotic, the situation is relatively stable. The most difficult problem is how to navigate through areas controlled by chaotic factions. The two of them sat in the corner of the tavern, Jiang Lu asked, and Song Hu talked about his past. The heart of the river gradually sank. Song Hu's caravan successfully crossed the Golden Road, but also suffered heavy losses, with no one surviving. They have no ability to return to Changnan. Song Hu clasped his hands together and asked another question. Jiang, you haven't joined any other mercenary groups, have you? Jiang Lu nodded and said, Brother Song, I was just preparing to become a mercenary. Song Hu grinned and showed a smile. His rough cheeks did not show mercy, but rather resembled a wicked tiger descending from the mountain. Jiang Lu was not frightened by this face, he felt that Song Hu's charm must be very low. Jiang, brother, I am currently in the White Lion Mercenary Corps. Are you interested? Upon hearing this name, Jiang Lu's powerful memory instantly reminded him of a character in the game. He was surprised and asked, White Lion Mercenary, Caroline. Song Hu was surprised and said, Do you know? Jiang Lu nodded and looked for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. He was very familiar with this character. Caroline, the legendary lord who appeared in the 1105 script. The female tyrant of the southern wilderness, the Blood Queen, the Revenge Queen, and the Mad Witch. She once occupied nearly 1/3 of the territory of the southern wilderness and became the most powerful lord of the southern wilderness. The White Lion Mercenary Corps is an advanced infantry unit of the human faction. This name comes from a common saying. If you harm a lion, you will soon face the entire lion pack. Lions are social animals with strong family ties. If a lion is threatened or injured, it will issue a warning to its family members and form an alliance with other adult lions to seek revenge. Moreover, lions will engage in long-term tracking and retaliation to protect family members. The white lion is usually considered the most vulnerable lion in a pack. The reason is probably due to albinism. The original intention of the White Lion Mercenary Corps was to gather and become strong due to their weakness, and to seek revenge through strong bowel movements. This retaliatory mentality is the reason for the rapid rise of the Caroline faction. The vast majority of humans living in the southern wilderness carry a strong hatred. Bandits who act recklessly, fierce mercenaries, greedy lords, terrifying foreigners, their loved ones were killed, their homes were occupied, and their wealth was plundered. Caroline is a match, she lit the thatch piled on the ground. The raging flames of revenge burned across the entire southern wilderness, hating and killing each other, ultimately becoming her great achievement. This is also the reason why the Caroline faction ultimately failed, with flames burning not only on their enemies but also on themselves. When the blazing flames reach her bone marrow, evaporating the last drop of blood, her withered form will no longer be able to support her belief in revenge. Chapter 4. Campsite. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Jiang Lu was lost in thought, and he was very concerned about the character Caroline. In the setting book of Fantasy Continent War, Caroline is not a good person. She likes to play tricks and schemes, is greedy, selfish, crazy, and cold-blooded, difficult to figure out. Jiang Lu once played another legendary hero in the script of 1105. He formed an alliance with Caroline. However, once deployed, the interior becomes empty. Caroline would cunningly send spies into the territory, causing his support to rapidly decline. Then, when the support level drops to a certain level, she will dispatch her subordinates to incite rebellion, tear up the alliance, and launch a counterattack against him. She can pay any price for her ambition. She once made a contract with evil gods to enter a fortified city. After invading the city, she slaughtered it as promised and dedicated the souls of tens of thousands of people to the gods. With such leadership, Jiang Lu is very uneasy about his personal safety. The river hesitated for a moment, but ultimately nodded. He knows one thing, even if he picks and finds a less bad mercenary group, the result may not be very good. Because this is a southern wilderness, greed and cunning are noble virtues, kindness and compassion are tickets to hell. Undoubtedly, Caroline possesses all the qualities of success in the southern wilderness. Caroline was able to rise rapidly in just a few short years. As a member of the White Lion Mercenary Regiment, there is a high probability that he will receive generous rewards from dispatching missions. He will save up some money and leave with his belongings, heading to the Empire and the Southern Federation to find a new leader and a safe working environment. Song Hu clasped his hands together, squinted his eyes with a smile, and replied, "It's so kind." Song Hu stood up, with the river following behind him. The two left the mercenary tavern. The two of them walked through the crisscrossing alleys and quickly arrived at the headquarters of the White Lion Mercenary Corps. The base of the White Lion Mercenary Corps is not small, but it appears very rudimentary. Surrounded by wooden fences, there are several mud and thatched houses. Some mercenaries hold long swords and train on the school field, some navigate through agile wooden stakes, some sat on the side, fixing the sharpening stone with their feet, and the sharp blade rubbed against the flashing sparks. The river quietly observed the surroundings, while a few people raised their heads and curiously observed the young man wearing a mask. Song Hu's gaze turned to a person wearing armor. The opponent is holding a sharp sword and guiding mercenaries in their swordsmanship. Vertina. Vertina turned her head and Song Hu waved at her. Viltina patted the mercenary's shoulder in front of her and said sternly, "Wave your sword 200 more times." She then walked over to Song Hu and asked, "Song, what's up?" Song Hu patted Jiang Lu on the back and introduced him to Vertina. "This is a young man from my hometown, Jiang Lu. He wants to join the mercenary group." Vertina took off her helmet, and golden hair flowed down from behind. Her face is beautiful, with almost no blemishes on her cheeks. Her skin is white and delicate, and she looks a bit like the long-haired version of the dumb-hair King Eltolia. Brave and gentle, yet still feminine. Vertina, the future commander of the White Lion Mercenary Regiment. Loyal and upright, adhering to the laws of chivalry, and having repeatedly persuaded Caroline. After the massacre, Vertina was completely disappointed with Caroline. Led the White Lion Mercenary Corps to collectively launch an attack on the enemy. After Caroline's failure, she requested the coalition to let her go, but was refused. Shortly after Caroline's death, she chose to follow her monarch. She knelt in front of Caroline's grave and personally pierced her own heart. Viltina looked up and down at the river. At this moment, Jiang Lu was wearing a simple gray top and gray horse pants. Wearing a wooden mask on his face, he could only see his eyes and mouth. It looks very strange. And he doesn't have any weapons in his hands. The overall image doesn't look like a mercenary, but rather like a farmer. Viltina frowned and stared at the river, asking, "Since you're a mercenary, where's your weapon? Is that possible? Are you a monk? Monks are skilled in unarmed combat." Jiang Lu smiled bitterly and replied, "Let me just consider myself a swordsman." This is the result of Jiang Lu's thinking. Sword, as a weapon, appeared very frequently in the fantasy continent wars, and a considerable number of legendary lords used swords as their weapons. If it weren't for the ease with the sword, they wouldn't have done it that way. The river decides to follow the flow. Okay, I understand. Vertina pointed to the arena in the middle of the school field and looked sternly at the river. Go up, mercenary, I'll test your strength. Vertina glanced at Song Hu and then turned to the river. Her expression was indifferent as she spoke. Mercenaries, not everyone can join the White Lion Mercenary Corps. Our daily routine is combat, and death is behind us. If we don't have the power to kill enemies, death's sickle will not only be aimed at you, but also at your companions who are dragged down by you. Song Hu's eyes narrowed slightly, and his right hand turned the Buddha pearl without paying attention to Vertina's gaze. Song Hu knew that Vertina was unhappy with him bringing the river over. At a glance, it is clear that Jiang Lu's body is not like a mercenary at all, but rather like a pampered aristocrat. Jiang Lu's hands are fair, unlike those trained for a long time. The arms are thin, lacking muscles, and lack a sense of strength. Jiang Lu's legs are not even as thick as his forearms. There is also the temperament of the river, and his eyes lack consciousness. He hesitates when he sees sparks flickering on the sharpening stone, and worries when he sees mercenaries fighting on the school field. His eyes were filled with anxiety, and there was no trace of the bloody smell of battle on his body. Most skilled mercenaries can read this information from Jiang Lu. That kid is like them before entering the industry, green, immature, and innocent. In Vertina's eyes, Jiang Lu did not have the qualification to join the White Lion Mercenary Corps. There are 3 recruitment requirements for the White Lion Mercenary Corps. 1. A strong belief in revenge. Even weak as a wild dog, the will to bite off a piece of meat from the tiger's leg. 2. Strength. The ability to kill enemies and protect the strength of companions. 3. Other values equivalent to the salary of the White Lion Mercenary Corps. To join the White Lion Mercenary Corps, one of 3 conditions must be met. Unless the captain and deputy captain speak up in person, no one can go through the back door in front of Vertina. However, Song Hu's eyes were fixed on the river. What comes to mind is not a young ghost who has not yet dried up, but a wicked tiger dressed in sheepskin. As he stood up from the tavern and approached the river. When the river looked at him nervously, his body couldn't help but tense for a moment. The moment when the river recedes and becomes aware of combat. He felt a deadly danger and a word of death flashed through his mind. The last time he had this feeling was when a fierce tiger appeared in the mountains not far from the village when he was a child. He hid behind the tree, covered his mouth, desperately trying not to let out any sound. Jiang Lu's expression was so innocent, filled with fear of strangers. But he felt like a child in front of a fierce tiger. Song Hu doesn't think that's his illusion. From the Golden Road to the southern wilderness, he knew well how many terrifying enemies he would face along the way. The river has survived. Chapter 5. Suppression. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Vertina bent her legs slightly, then jumped up and jumped onto the arena. Vertina landed on the arena. The armor she was wearing was extremely heavy, making a loud thud when it landed. The friction between the gaps of the armor produces a piercing metallic collision sound. It's like a huge iron block hitting the arena. Jiang Lu looked surprised. It's hard for him to imagine that someone in reality has such strong power and explosiveness. Vertina's gaze turned towards him, stern and full of scrutiny. This is his first job in a different world, and he is very worried about Vertina's interview. The interviewer seems to have some objections to him. Jiang Lu couldn't help but imagine being beaten up by Vertina. What should we do? He has no idea how to use weapons. The skill field is empty, with a force value of 100. I don't know to what extent it can be used. Jiang Lu took a deep breath, patted his cheek, and quickly calmed down. Thanks to his mental strength of 100, his memory is now very amazing. The past game visuals are vividly remembered. He remembers that the average member of the White Lion Mercenary Corps had a strength value of around 30.50. This is already very high, the average person's strength value is 10.15. As long as he can perform normally, it should not be difficult for him to pass. He took a wooden sword from the weapon rack placed on the arena, held the hilt with both hands, and stood ready. Viltina frowned even deeper. Jiang Lu stood on the arena, his sword-holding posture was very strange, his leg movements were not up to standard, and his body's center of gravity was raised very high. In the eyes of the swordsman Viltina, Jiang Lu's posture was extremely awkward, with her whole body covered in flaws. She shot in an instant, the heavy armor didn't affect her speed at all, and she ran like a heavy tank. The various noisy sounds in Jiang Lu's ears quickly quieted down, leaving only Viltina in her eyes. The river no longer observes and listens in all directions, but focuses on the battle in front of it. He also slowed down his perception of time, and he saw clearly the flying golden hair of Viltina, the sharp light in her eyes. He took a step to the right at a fast pace, and Viltina passed by him. The attack was unsuccessful, and Viltina quickly changed her move. The wooden sword sliced through a circular arc and slashed towards the mask worn on the river's cheek. The river jumped back a step. He was a bit surprised, as Viltina's movements seemed a bit slow in his eyes. He had plenty of reaction time and quickly walked behind Viltina. That's right, let's go. The range of leg movements in the river is very small, but the pace is astonishingly fast. At this moment, Viltina completed the chopping action. She raised her eyebrows, took a step forward, twisted her body, and wanted to face the river again. As Viltina was about to turn around, the river calmly walked behind her. Viltina's eyes narrowed slightly, her gaze extremely surprised. She turned around again, her body retreated, and the river followed behind her like a shadow. Below the arena, the mercenaries watching the battle looked at each other. They initially had the idea of watching good movies and didn't take the river flow seriously. They didn't expect the speed of the river to be so fast. They stood below the arena, making it difficult to even observe the movement trajectory of the river. Especially when the river flows, the legs sway left and right, and the speed seems to disappear. On the arena, Viltina sang softly. Her body suddenly emitted a little white light. She is praying, she is singing, the great deity bestows protection upon the mortal beings, giving them fearless courage. A type of extraordinary power, the protective power brought by faith. Viltina turned around again, her speed skyrocketed, and her wooden sword stabbed straight into the river. The river's avoidance was no longer as easy as before, and he turned sideways. Viltina's wooden sword changed from vertical to horizontal and aimed at the waist of the river. The speed of the river has once again accelerated and turned into a running state. The rough wooden sword, under the control of Viltina, followed him closely. The river began to move around Viltina, and the two of them looked like a top. Viltina is the center of the gyroscope, and the river is chased by a wooden sword, moving at the edge of the gyroscope. The strong airflow condensed over the two of them, and a fierce storm spread in all directions, forming a small whirlwind that caused objects near the school field to tilt in all directions. The river found a gap and broke free from the rotating blade. Viltina was still spinning in place, but her speed gradually slowed down. Viltina stopped, her footsteps stumbling and her eyes dazed. She propped up her wooden sword with both hands, and her expression on the face was very painful, as if she was about to vomit out at any moment. She turned herself unconscious, spinning around like a clone in front of the river, everywhere. She calmed down, stood up again, put on a good posture, and asked, "Do you only know how to run away?" Jiang Lu quickly reacted to the interviewer's question and replied, "Miss Viltina, I'm going to attack." Jiang Lu put on a posture, which was the first position that Viltina attacked him, and he learned it with a certain attitude. He stepped on the ground, his speed accelerating in an instant, like a stream of shadows, and instantly arrived in front of Vertina. He wielded his sword and swung down at a speed that made the air resistance as sticky as soil. The wind direction under the blade of the sword diffuses on both sides, emitting a burst of sound like a rotor plane cutting through the air. Vertina reacted quickly and immediately blocked the wooden sword on her shoulder. Jiang Lu was surprised to find that Vertina's wooden sword was instantly cut open. The wooden sword in his hand emitted a faint red light on one side. During the movement of the wooden sword, it vigorously rubs against the air on the side where the blade comes into contact with the air, causing the temperature to rise. At the same time, the air at the front end is compressed, accumulating energy, increasing internal energy, and further increasing temperature. This is like a meteorite falling from high altitude, which generates heat due to air friction and emits a faint red light. A small airflow dissipated and instantly cut through Vertina's beautiful face. The river stopped in an instant, and the blade of the sword stopped in front of Vertina's silver armor. He took a step back, his expression somewhat shocked. Vertina stood still, instinctively placing her left hand on the wound on her cheek. The scorching pain made her take a cold breath, and she regained her senses. She looked at the broken wooden sword in her hand and fell into silence. Pop pop pop. Applause came from below the arena. The river tilted its head, and the surrounding situation reflected in his eyes, and the sound rushed into his ears. His mind began to calculate and think again, and the slow time became normal. Thinking is actually a way for rivers to adapt to their environment. If he focuses on one thing, time will become extremely slow in his perception. The basic abilities of Jianglu have reached an incredible level. Life has limits, and no matter how much humans exercise, it is difficult to make their skin as hard as the scales of a dragon, to elevate their strength to the level of a giant, and to possess the spiritual power of 1,000 or even 10,000-year-old elf. Faith, anger, magic, these extraordinary powers are the ways to increase the upper limit. However, the lower limit of the river is the ceiling of this world. Jiang Lu is not aware of these, and his evaluation of himself is very low. This is mainly because he has just arrived in this world and lacks self-awareness. Jiang Lu's personality is cautious, meticulous, and lacks ambition, which makes it difficult for him to evaluate himself correctly. Chapter 6. Team Leader. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. The river looked down at the audience and a girl let go of her clapping hand. She was wearing a light blue dress with white flowers dotted on her chest. The white lace on the hem of the skirt is like a lotus pod, and white stockings are worn on the legs. She wore lace-patterned gloves on both hands. In this era, gloves were once considered a symbol of elegance. People with social status generally wear gloves. The girl held a sky-blue staff in her right hand, softly reciting spells, and flew to the arena. Magician. Jiang Lu's eyebrows furrowed slightly. In the world of fantasy continent wars, the power of magic comes from human desires, flowing towards the deep void, and then being captured by the mage in this world, symbolizing paranoia and madness. The overall painting style of the power of magic is more inclined to the myth of Cthulhu, which is an extremely dangerous and treacherous force. Among the main factions of humanity, only the Southern Federation allows ordinary people to learn magic. The Empire in the Northwest once allowed ordinary people to learn magic. Until the year 825 of the imperial calendar, a magical genius blew up the entire imperial capital. In the capital, survivors are influenced by the power of magic and transformed into distorted monsters. The dead revived and transformed into eerie evil creatures. Meanwhile, a highly contagious magical plague spread around the imperial capital, directly leading to the death of 1/3 of the empire's population. This is also one of the second-generation scripts of Fantasy Continent War. The Deadly Plague. The prototype of this event is a disease that once occurred in Europe, the famous Black Death. Since then, the Empire has deeply despised magic. They see magic as a forbidden force. A powerful organization of demon hunters, one of their businesses is to find and burn wizards. In Changnan, the descendants of dragon blood in the east have resistance to magic, and only they are allowed to learn and use magic. And in the northernmost kingdom of knights, only women who have been baptized by gods can learn magic. The river is quite wary of magicians. Many magicians in the game are paranoid and crazy, and the most typical example is Caroline. However, he still believed that the girl in front of him was a well-behaved and kind angel. The girl wore long blue hair, and her azure pupils were as pure as clear sky. Similarly beautiful, Bertina gives people a strong and heroic spirit that is not inferior to men. Girls are petite and obedient, like the younger sister next door, giving people a feeling of wanting to take care of each other. The girl let go of her hand and, under the influence of magic, stood her wand on the ground. She lifted her head, her eyes filled with admiration for the strength of the river. She put her toes back, pinched the hem of her skirt with both hands, lifted the beautiful lace slightly, and made a standard dress lifting gift. "Hello, Your Excellency Jianglu. Welcome to the White Lion Mercenary Corps. I am Caroline, the commander of the White Lion Mercenary Corps." Jianglu was taken aback, and couldn't help but take a cold breath from the corner of his mouth. He carefully scrutinized the girl. How could it be? Caroline's hair is dark red and looks as if it has been stained with blood. Caroline's eye sockets are deeply sunken with very noticeable dark circles. The whiteness of the eyes presents a strange gray color, while the pupils are dark red, deep as a pit, and red as blood. His eyes were filled with crazy ambition and twisted desires. Caroline's red lips were like flames, always carrying a seductive smile. Caroline's figure is much taller than the girl in front of her, and her chest circumference is completely different. Jianglu couldn't help but question, "Are you Captain Caroline?" Caroline flashed a helpless smile at the corner of her mouth, then pursed her lips and looked seriously at Jianglu. "Of course, Your Excellency Jianglu." Caroline paused and lifted her hair, which covered her cheeks. Her azure pupils sparkled with a deep star-like light, bursting with strong confidence. She stated, "Caroline Soe, the descendant of the great Kaiser, the bloodline of the Seven Seas, the owner of the blood of our ancestors, and also the heir of the Southern Kingdom." Caroline's identity is quite complex. The ancestor of the Selwi family was the pirate emperor of the Seven Seas, who later landed in the Southern Kingdom and occupied that barren land. At that time, those people claimed to be ancestors, pioneers of the New World, and the earliest rulers of the Southern Kingdom. The ancestors of the Selwi family were elected as emperors of the Southern Kingdom and have been ruling over the Southern Kingdom. Until later, the Southern Kingdom occupied the southern wilderness and was hammered by the orcs of the Dark Mountains, resulting in the death of the emperor in the war. The Southern Kingdom was divided, and the ruling area of the Selwi family was divided, effectively controlling only one duchy. The Selwi family has been seeking restoration, but has faced fierce opposition from other factions in the country. In the imperial calendar 1,100 years ago, a coup broke out in the territory of the Selwi family. The rule of the Selwi family was ended, and Caroline Selwi, as the daughter of Grand Duke Selwi and the legitimate heir of the Selwi family, escaped from the coup under the protection of Selwi soldiers. A considerable portion of the White Lion Mercenary Corps are elite soldiers from the Selwi family. Zhaoshuyuan.com Jianglu still couldn't believe it, the future female tyrant and crazy witch looked like this now. "Your Excellency Jianglu, welcome to join the White Lion Mercenary Corps." Jianglu noticed the light Caroline was looking forward to, and the female leader seemed to appreciate him very much. His eyes flickered, and he placed his right hand on his chest, bowing slightly. "I'm willing to serve you, Captain Caroline." Caroline showed a satisfied smile at the corner of her mouth. She nodded slightly and said, "Your Excellency Jianglu, please come with me." Caroline walked ahead, accompanied by Vertina for protection, and the three of them walked all the way to the office location inside the camp. The room is even more rudimentary than the thatched hut inside the campsite, just a wooden animal skin tent fixed in place. The furnishings in the room are extremely simple, with a set of tables and chairs, and a flower pot in one corner of the room, with blue flowers blooming. There were several piles of documents on the table, and Caroline accurately pulled out a piece of parchment from them. She sat on the chair, took out a feather pen, modified some of the content, and then handed it over to Jiang Lu. Jiang Lu can infer the meaning expressed in Latin through the body movements and reactions of others while reviewing documents. However, without reference, he could not understand the text in front of him. Caroline noticed Jiang Lu's expression and said very thoughtfully, "Your Excellency Jiang Lu, I will explain it to you." Caroline gave him the position of squadron captain. At present, the White Lion Mercenary Corps consists of 230 people. The composition of the small team is 10 people, the squadron is 50 people, and the battalion is 100 people. The position of the 5th Squadron is temporarily vacant, and Caroline hopes he can take over this position. Jiang Lu originally planned to start as an ordinary mercenary, but the female leader highly valued him and immediately appointed him as a senior manager responsible for 50 people. Chapter 7. Invitation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Jiang Lu pondered for a moment, shook his head, but still refused. Captain Caroline, I don't have experience leading mercenaries. I hope to start from scratch. Jiang Lu has just entered the workplace and lacks experience. In the southern wilderness, there must be no shortage of thugs carrying human lives under their command. He is a lawful citizen who has been educated since childhood to resist the underworld and maintain the public order and good customs of society. In his view, these people are no different from the lawless underworld. He was forced to make a living and chose to become a thug. But what's the difference between being their superior and being a gang leader? Jiang Lu also lacks the confidence to lead them. You know, just a few hours ago, Jiang Lu was still staying at home playing games, worrying about tomorrow's work. So. Caroline's blue eyes looked at the river, showing a thoughtful expression. After a moment, she replied, "Okay, Your Excellency Jiang Lu." Caroline modified some of the content by transferring the contract document 180 degrees and pushing it back to the river. Caroline explained the modified content, stating that in addition to losing some privileges enjoyed by the squadron leader, his treatment was retained, and his salary was even higher than that of an ordinary squadron leader. Jiang Lu is most concerned about the basic salary, with 3 golden crowns per month. Jiang Lu has been to a mercenary tavern, and the basic salary for an ordinary mercenary is about 1 silver coin per month. The mercenaries of the White Lion Mercenary Corps are mostly elite, averaging around 3 silver coins per month. Caroline gave him a base salary equivalent to 30 times that of an ordinary mercenary. The female leader highly values him and doesn't seem to have any intention of keeping him at the grassroots level. Jiang Lu eventually signed his name and became a mercenary as planned. Just as he left the camp not far away, a mercenary walked towards him. The man is not tall, with a thin body, sharp-tongued monkey cheeks, and sparkling eyes. He smiled at the corners of his mouth and said, "Hello, Your Excellency Jiang Lu, West Coster, a captain of the White Lion Mercenary Regiment." West was very enthusiastic and said, "Your Excellency Jiang Lu, I have seen your battles. You are so strong, Captain Vertina is not even your opponent." Jiang Lu quickly waved his hand and said, "How could it be? Captain Vertina, take it seriously. I'm definitely not a match. Your Excellency Jiang Lu, you are too humble." West is full of praise for the river's flow. West's expression was exaggerated, with a flirtatious smile on the corner of his mouth. Suddenly, he said, "Your Excellency Jiang Lu, since you have joined the mercenary group, you cannot help but visit someone. He is the king of mercenaries led by the Prince of Bia, ruling over all the mercenaries led by the Prince of Bia. Mercenary groups are actually quite free, and mercenaries can move freely without tasks or summoning. Several mercenaries who were familiar with West also approached, and in almost an instant, they guessed West's purpose and paid their respects to the mercenary king led by Prince Bia. Jiang Lu showed a thoughtful expression. It seems to be a customary rule for newly hired mercenaries to pay their respects to the king of mercenaries, which is something that mercenaries must do. The river suddenly thought of a word, bow to the dock. Jiang Lu is not unfamiliar with this kind of thing. Some newly appointed colleagues will specially report to their leaders and give gifts in order to seek their care. Jiang Lu is not interested in these rules, he has confidence in his own skills. However, the difference is that in the previous company, he didn't have to give gifts to his superiors. Now, according to West, he couldn't help but visit the king of mercenaries. This mercenary king seems to have a big background, even taller than the commander of the White Lion Mercenary Regiment. Most likely it was the mercenary leader led by the Prince of Bia. Jiang Lu nodded and thanked West for his reminder. West smiled at the corner of his mouth and rested his right hand on Jiang Lu's shoulder, treating him as a good friend. And as more and more people gathered around West and Jiang Lu calmly answered his colleagues' questions. Jiang Lu understands the curiosity of his colleagues. When he first joined, his seniors had excellent skills and he always sought advice on technical difficulties from them. Excellent people always bring peace of mind. Moreover, mercenaries require a life-threatening job, relying on others and being relied upon by others. Just like the military, having a powerful comrade around can be even more reassuring. They walked all the way to a hotel. On the open space on the first floor of a two-story building, a beautiful girl was heavily dressed and showcased her beauty. They wore charming smiles at the corners of their mouths and greeted the guests. The river can easily tell that this is an unremarkable hotel. West approached and talked to the hotel owner, then gave him a few silver coins. The river frowned. His ears were simultaneously surrounded by a wheezing male voice and a captivating female voice. Jiang Lu faced a very awkward problem, with the vast majority of rooms not soundproof, and his perception was extremely sensitive. Quickly, West walked over and patted the back of the river with his right hand. "Let's go, the mercenary king is on the second floor," he said. Jiang Lu sighed in his heart and stepped on the wooden stairs of the hotel, the ancient wooden boards making a creaking sound. He bravely walked to the second floor. West opened a room and gestured for the river to enter. There are 3 women inside, one of whom is sitting on a chair with a neutral appearance and a proud expression on her face. She sits cross-legged on the chair. 2 other women stood, one holding a whip and the other wearing the attire of a maid. Wester leaned in the ear of the river and said, "Be careful, the 3 of them are not easy to mess with." Jiang Lu noticed 3 women with a cautious expression. Wester retreated. Jiang Lu turned his head and suddenly showed a smile of successful trickery. "Don't worry, Jiang Lu brothers. I have paid you before, enjoy it well, don't be squeezed dry by them." The mercenaries around West showed unrestrained smiles, coaxed each other, and slammed the door shut. The river turned its head and the woman in the middle stood up, throwing her coat on the ground. Her gaze was like a hunter looking at her prey, walking step by step towards the river. The other 2 women are also taking off their clothes. Jiang Lu suddenly realized what the king of mercenaries was. This is a trick, they want to invite him for a health check. Up to welcome him. Mercenaries in the southern wilderness have their own culture, wealth, power, reputation, and women. Wester brought him to this place precisely to help him adapt to the environment. Jiang Lu's mouth curved into a bitter smile, and he quickly turned around, pulled open the door handle, and retreated out. The speed of the river was very fast, and before 3 women rushed over, he immediately completed a series of actions and closed the door again. The mercenary had not yet left and the river came down from upstairs and patted West's shoulder. "Sorry, Mr. West, I don't like doing this kind of thing. West was stunned for a moment, and the river quickly left the hotel. West noticed the back of the river flowing away and his eyes slowly narrowed. Someone next to him said, "Boss, unfortunately, he's not one of us." Chapter 8. Situation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. A few days later, Jianglu gradually became familiar with the working environment of the White Lion Mercenary Corps. He felt the disharmony within the White Lion Mercenary Corps. The White Lion Mercenary Corps can be roughly divided into three factions. One is the Free Mercenary faction represented by West Coster. They are pure southern wasteland mercenaries, greedy, lascivious, and ambitious. They are relatively dissatisfied with the current situation of the White Lion Mercenary Corps, and mercenaries should be more free and greedy. They have a certain level of strength and crave higher status, some even want to replace Caroline. One is the Avengers represented by Vertina. A considerable portion of the Avengers come from the Southern Kingdom. They protected Caroline's arrival in the Southern Kingdom, loyal, brave, carrying hatred towards the enemy, and dreaming of restoring their homeland. At the same time, they absorbed some young people. These young people are different from liberal mercenaries. Some have witnessed bandits killing their loved ones, some villages have been destroyed by foreign tribes, and some are dissatisfied with greedy lords. They have all planted seeds of hatred in their hearts, with strong willpower. One type is the neutral faction led by Song Hu. Most of the neutral factions are local people under the jurisdiction of the Prince of Bia, many of whom come from rural backgrounds and have lost their land without any other sources of income. They have wives, children, or other parents and relatives. Mercenaries are a job for them, they need to support themselves and their families. The neutral faction does not have a clear bias, they are not as ambitious as the liberal faction and eager to change the status quo of the Free Mercenary Corps. They don't have clear revenge goals like the Avengers, and they crave to become stronger. The strongest member of the White Lion Mercenary Corps is the Avengers. They hold most of the power, and the captain and squadron leader are mercenaries of the Avengers. The liberals lack strong leadership figures and are themselves scattered like sand among various mercenary teams. However, as the White Lion Mercenary Regiment expands and a large number of mercenaries join, the strength of the liberals will visibly grow rapidly. In the original timeline, Caroline would become crazy and more inclined towards liberals. Meanwhile, Jiang Lu obtained a large amount of information about Caroline from the mercenaries. Caroline is currently not as greedy, crazy, and cold-blooded as he knows. In the eyes of liberals, she is a naive and lucky little girl. She inherited the family's property and also had a large number of loyal soldiers. The White Lion Mercenary Corps has been described by liberals as Caroline's mercenary game. They looked down on Caroline very much and thought to themselves, if I had Caroline's identity, I could do the same. Typically, I can do it myself. Caroline lacks credibility in the eyes of liberals. The Avengers regard Caroline as a mascot, placing greater emphasis on her identity as a descendant of the Servi family and an heir to the Southern Kingdom. They are looking forward to Caroline, but not now. Because she is still a 15-year-old girl. The neutral faction is actually the person who supports Caroline the most. Because Caroline monopolized the personnel work of the White Lion Mercenary Corps. For every mercenary who joins the Free Mercenary Corps, Caroline will personally negotiate contracts with them and explain the meaning of the terms. For the neutral camp, Caroline is the boss who pays them wages, and what the neutral camp values most is salary. The newly added young people in the Revenge faction also have great respect for Caroline. Caroline has awakened the essential skill for a leader, drawing pancakes. She talked about the future and expectations in front of those young people, encouraging them. The river showed a thoughtful expression. Caroline is not as naive as liberals may seem, nor is she just hopeful for the future, as Avengers see it. Caroline is not a silly and sweet person, she is an ambitious person who is trying to control the White Lion Mercenary Corps, rather than being limited by age and only following the opinions of the Avengers. The river is particularly cared for by Caroline. She is like how Liu Bei treated Zhuge Liang and Qiao Boss treated Guan Yu in romance novels, often showing him warmth and concern. Caroline wants to cultivate him as her confidant. Caroline saw his ability and potential. The 5 major attributes of military, physical fitness, bravery, spirit, and charm are all comprehensive attributes. They are composed of numerous subordinate attributes. For example, mental attributes have 2 subordinate attributes. Assess personnel potential and assess their abilities. Jiang Lu has also been exploring the functions of the system these days. He discovered a special ability to consciously call out to the character panel and see other people's panels. Staying on someone for about a minute can unleash their potential. Among them: Vertina, potential. 82 Caroline, potential. 85 Song Hu, potential. 75 West, potential. 60 In terms of ability, there are initially 3 unknown question marks. He gradually displays possible attributes by observing the other person, and finally displays specific personal attributes. Observing a certain behavior of a character will significantly reduce the time it takes to obtain specific attributes. For example, Caroline now. Caroline military. Physical fitness. 8.15 Yang Wu. Spirit. 68.80 Charm. 75 Caroline's charismatic attributes are the best observed, as they are related to her appearance and her ability to recruit subordinates and be loved. He can observe her appearance with the naked eye, and listening to others talk can help him understand their attitudes towards Caroline. In terms of military affairs, Jiang Lu has never seen Caroline commanding subordinate battles, so the attributes are displayed. The state of. In terms of physical fitness, Jiang Lu can roughly obtain some information by observing Caroline's daily actions. Just like traditional Chinese medicine, one can tell what kind of illness a person has by looking, hearing, and questioning. He only does observation, and the information he obtains is relatively limited. Courage is related to combat, but unfortunately, Jiang Lu has never seen Caroline fight with anyone else. The spiritual attributes are obtained by observing Caroline's words. He observed Caroline, and Caroline was also observing him. Caroline certainly doesn't have a system panel. However, judging the potential of personnel and assessing their abilities is an individual's ability, and the Zhaoshuyuan.com system only digitizes it. Caroline can speculate on the approximate abilities of others. She already has a high level of spiritual attributes and is currently focused on personnel-related work. Her attributes of judging personnel potential and abilities are not inferior. Caroline's gaze at the river has been getting hotter lately. The White Lion Mercenary Regiment is now equivalent to a small force that cannot even make it to the 3rd tier, and suddenly there comes an out-of-town Lu Bu. What's even more surprising is that this Lu Bu seems to be more than just a Lu Bu. Other attributes also have extremely high values. Greedy eyes. Jiang Lu also felt that Caroline urgently wanted someone who could truly support her. The Avengers treat Caroline as a mascot, holding it in their hands for fear of breaking, holding it in their mouths for fear of melting, and treating it as a treasure. Caroline didn't think much of the Freedom Party. The neutral faction is loyal to Caroline. But on the one hand, the neutral faction does not have the strong will of the revenge faction. Secondly, they do not have the ambition of liberals. They are more like entering the company, fishing for work, earning money and leaving work. And the young people of the Avengers, compared to Caroline, are more loyal to their master, the Southern Kingdom soldiers who taught them. The vengeful warriors sincerely cultivate these young people, hoping to serve Caroline. Jiang Lu speculated on the leader's thoughts, and Caroline probably wanted to use him as a fulcrum to unite the neutral faction and some supporters, in order to prove herself and control the entire White Lion mercenary corps. Jiang Lu shook his head. If it were in the past, he wouldn't have had that much cunning. But now, mental power affects memory, judgment, and thinking abilities by observing others, the river's mind grows day by day. He can poke a few holes in his own heart when he sees how many tricks others have. Chapter 9. Gifts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. On that day, Jiang Lu received a special gift. Viltina carried a huge box and slammed it in front of the river. Viltina gave the boy a deep glance and slowly opened the box. Inside is a metal lock armor and a magnificent metal long sword. In this era, the cost of lock armor is very high. The lock armor is made by splicing lock rings one by one, purely handmade. Crafted with exquisite lock armor, the number of lock rings can reach tens of thousands. The protective performance of lock armor is quite good. Ordinary swords, bows, and crossbows are difficult to penetrate the defense of lock armor. Not heavy axes and hammers, strong bows and crossbows, and conical armor-piercing arrows. These weapons not only destroy lock armor. Even if the lock armor can withstand the attacks of these weapons, powerful force can penetrate the armor and cause blunt damage. Jiang Lu lowered his head to observe, and in front of him was not an ordinary spear armor. The lock ring of the lock armor is engraved with a metal inscription, which is a work of dwarves. Dwarves can inject unique magical powers into equipment, greatly improving its performance. Jiang Lu, this armor comes from Princess Caroline's brother, the eldest prince of the southern kingdom, said Viltina. Jiang Lu raised his eyebrows upwards. He noticed a detail that the back of this lock armor had been repaired, and the new lock ring did not have the rune of a dwarf. This lock armor was once pierced by powerful weapons. Caroline's brother, his ending can be imagined. Princess Caroline asked me to give them to you, continued Viltina. Viltina placed her right hand on the shoulder of the river, and he could smell a faint fragrance of hair and a rich floral scent. According to Jiang Lu's observation, Captain Vertina is a person who is quite concerned about appearance. She pays great attention to cleanliness, and when maintaining her armor, she specifically chooses a floral-scented oil for wiping. In this era of war, the average lifespan of a person is around 20 years old, and the age of marriage is very early. Captain Vertina is already 20.4 years old and not married yet. She appears cold on the surface, but occasionally sighs at men, hoping that someone will notice her charm. This cannot escape the powerful five senses of the river. Vertina will take off her helmet, but she never takes off her armor. She hopes that others will pay attention to her beautiful face, rather than the developed tendinos under her armor. Even more pitiful is that, as far as Jiang Lu knows, in 1105, at the age of 28, Viltina remains single. My older female boss. Jiang Lu's actual age is slightly older than Vertina's, but in reality, his body is only 15 years old. Jiang Lu, Princess Caroline values you very much. Don't disappoint her expectations. The river regained its senses and thanked Viltina. Captain Vertina, I will work hard to complete the task and not disappoint Captain Caroline's expectations. Viltina nodded and said, by the way, gather at 1 p.m. this afternoon and I will lead you on the mission. I understand, Captain Vertina. Show off well. Vertina left. Jiang Lu looked at Viltina's back, and a row of information appeared in the lower right corner of his eyes. Viltina potential. 82 military. 70.90 physical fitness. 75 brave. 83 spirit. 45.72 charm. 68 Vertina's attributes are average and powerful. Extremely strong comprehensive ability. Among the human factions, the brave warriors of 83 belong to the top group. The actual physical fitness and martial arts attributes of an adult dragon are around 85. The attribute of bravery and martial arts above 85 mainly defines the character strength of other factions. For example, dragons, giants, trolls, orcs, black knights. From a purely human perspective, the most prominent attribute is military. After Vertina left, Jiang Lu learned about the task content from the other population. Within the territory of the Prince of Bia, a goblin camp appeared on the outskirts of a village. The village chief raised some money from the residents, hoping to commission mercenaries to destroy the goblin camp. This was originally the job of the Prince of Bia leading the guards. However, the lord led by the Prince of Bia came from a mercenary background and he never worked for the people within his territory. His purpose in occupying the territory of the Prince of Bia was to collect taxes. Land tax, livestock tax, transaction tax, poll tax. The more outrageous ones include dinner tax and marriage tax. The dinner tax was originally called the banquet tax, which can be considered as a form of accompanying meals. The lord's wedding, or hosting a banquet, or inviting guests. The lords within the territory have the obligation to assist them in purchasing banquet food, gifts, and groceries. In essence, this obligation is to give money. The banquet tax was later renamed dinner tax, mainly because banquets cannot be held every day, but dinner must be eaten every day. The lord of Prince Bia's estate was short of money, so he slapped his head and confiscated the dinner tax for a long time. Marriage tax is very simple. As long as the recipient gets married, they must pay the tax. There are also forms of offering the bride to the lord without paying taxes. The lord is tired of playing, put it back. In this case, there is no need to pay taxes when getting married. If the bride is not beautiful enough, offer it to the lord. So it will anger the lord and directly kill the opponent's entire family. This is not the most outrageous. Women like a man, and men like a woman. As long as they pay taxes, it is considered marriage. Even if men use force against women, as long as they pay taxes, the guards don't care. The difference between the Prince of Bia and the bandits is that he is very gentle when looking for the book garden. www.zhaozhuiyuan.com. He will explain to the people why he is robbing their money and food. How could such a gentle lord manage the life and death of his people? The village chief can only rely on the mercenaries led by the Prince of Bia. The remuneration for this type of task is usually relatively low. How much money can a group of hard-working farmers raise, and most of it has also been taken by the lords. Mercenaries do not like to do such tasks. The remuneration of mercenaries mainly consists of two parts. Part of it is the base salary. The other part is the reward for completing the task, with the mercenary commander receiving 30% and the mercenary conducting the task receiving 70%. The spoils of war are also distributed according to this proportion. Jiang Lu sat on the school field and could hear the voices of some mercenaries complaining. He is happy to do such tasks in the game and can boost support. With high support, villagers will be willing to follow the new lord. There will be an option in the game, riot. If the support of the lords within the territory is low, but their support is high, they can recruit a large number of militia to attack the lords who rule them. If Jiang Lu controls game characters, this is basically the same routine. Establishing mercenary groups, boosting support, gathering mobs, and occupying territories. Jiang Lu strongly despised Caroline in 1105 because she was quite promiscuous. She made her subordinates play the role of robbers while lowering the support within his territory. At the same time, let another group of subordinates take on the task of the villagers, repel her subordinates, and increase her personal support. Then, Caroline will incite the villagers to rebel. Even if he fails, it doesn't matter. Most of the people who die are the ones who control the territory. Jiang Lu lowered his head, placed his right hand on the handle, and drew out Caroline's brother's long sword. The silver light reflected on his face, and the pure white blade reflected a pair of deep eyes. Chapter 10. Killing Machine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ads by Google equals window. Ads by Google. Push. Until noon, Jiang Lu received an unexpected news. Caroline will also participate in this mission. Some mercenaries of the Avengers hold opposing views and are unwilling to let Caroline fall. Goblin, who fantasizes about mainland wars, is not like the weak chicken characters in other games and fantasy movies. As a complete faction like humans, those guys are quite difficult to deal with and numerous in number. However, Caroline ultimately convinced the mercenaries of the Avengers. The bright sun shone brightly, and the flag of the White Lion Mercenary Corps cast a long shadow. At the gathering time, Caroline stood on the arena in front of the school field, accompanied by Viltina. Jiang Lu and other mercenaries stood below. The total number of mercenaries participating in this mission is 50, mostly elite members of the Avengers. In addition, there are 6 village militia members and village chiefs. When everyone arrived, Caroline glanced over and said in a loud voice, "I understand what you're worried about." Caroline's voice is clear and extremely penetrating. The charm of 70.5, Caroline's appearance can no longer be described simply as beautiful or beautiful, she has reached extraordinary standards. For the vast majority of people, Caroline has a strong attraction and can even influence one's thinking, making it irresistible to want to protect her. The mercenary's gaze was focused on Caroline. Caroline grabbed the staff and suddenly lifted it up, singing softly in her mouth. The void suddenly flickered with lightning, and 5 lightning snakes spread outwards, fiercely bombarding the ground of the school field. The hard ground trampled by mercenaries exploded with a loud bang, splattering with mud and creating 5 burnt black pits on the ground. She stood on a high platform, looking down at all the mercenaries, her young appearance displaying an aura that did not match her age group. The contemptuous gaze of liberal mercenaries became solemn. Undoubtedly, Caroline is a powerful mage. Caroline released her wand and swept the mercenaries under the arena again. Strength is more persuasive than language, and it is also easier to gain the respect of mercenaries. Let's go. Outside the town, there is a vast forest land. The natural conditions in the southern wilderness are actually quite good. The north has a continental climate, while the south has a Mediterranean climate. Linhai, with abundant rainfall, numerous rivers, and abundant hydraulic resources. The average altitude here is very low, mostly consisting of hills and plains, with vast arable land available for cultivation. Otherwise, the Southern Federation and Empire would be envious of this place. In the northern wilderness of the south, the forest coverage area is very high. Not far from the north is the territory of the Wooden Elves, and occasionally they can come across Wooden Elves who come out from the depths of the forest to adventure. In the forest, there are also hidden dangers. The 5 senses of the river flow are very sensitive. He stood on the outside of the mercenary team, and a group of people had just observed them from a distance before leaving soon. Forest robbers or mercenaries. The forest robbers are bandits, and there are many fugitives from the Southern Federation and Empire who have reached the southern wilderness and returned to their old jobs. A strong mercenary group doesn't mind making some extra money when encountering a weak mercenary group. This is a place where the weak prey on the strong. As the mercenary team delves into the forest, the creatures on the road are even more eye-catching for the river. Various giant spiders, forest wolves, and giant eagles hovering in the sky. They are the 3 most common deadly creatures in northern forests. Forest giant spiders and forest wolves are less likely to provoke groups of mercenaries. The giant eagle is different. If mercenaries show signs of fatigue, a giant eagle can take a dive and catch a person into the sky. This is like a seabird catching fish, poor mercenaries will be treated as food. The marching speed of mercenaries is not fast because they need to be ready for battle at any time. At noon on the 4th day, the river finally approached the village. The strength of Jianglu is relatively strong, standing at the forefront of the team. His footsteps suddenly stopped, he lifted his head, and his toes lifted a small stone downwards. The stone spun violently from the ground to mid-air and was grabbed by him. Magic like ball picking. The river threw forward, and the stones made a loud explosion sound. The violent airflow blew away the leaves along the way, and the stones accurately penetrated the chest of a green creature. Jiang Lu hesitated for a moment and glanced at his right hand. He just felt that he could take down distant creatures and take action before judgment. When the result came, he didn't expect that he could really do it. With a splash, the green creature fell from mid-air. A green body, short and thin, with a large drooping nose and a short bow fixed behind it. Forest Goblin Scout. Jiang Lu took a deep breath, and the blood bursting from Forest Goblin's chest floated in his mind. This is his first time killing a creature. Before, he had never even killed a chicken. He felt a bit uncomfortable, but he quickly calmed down. The mercenary beside the river was stunned, with a look of amazement in his eyes. Forest Goblin is hiding on a tree, with his body covered by leaves. The distance between the two is visually over 300 meters, and the river will kill with just one strike. After seeing this scene behind the river, Voltina gestured backwards and the mercenaries stopped moving forward. Although Captain Caroline participated this time, the actual leader of the team was still Vertina. She was once Caroline's guardian knight, leading mercenaries to complete several missions and possessing rich command and combat experience. Voltina walked up to several villagers and asked, "Chief Zack, let me confirm. When you left, was the village still there?" Zack village chief is a middle-aged man of 30 years old. He looks very old, with wrinkles on his cheeks and dry mud on the yellow soil. He is a simple old farmer. He carried a grass fork on his back, as if realizing something, with a panicked expression on his face, and quickly replied, yes, the village is still there." Voltina's eyes flickered as she pondered. Soon, Caroline and a few team captains gathered together. Jiang Lu was also called to the side. Voltina held her helmet in her left hand, her face serious, and spoke, "This is very close to the village. Forest Goblin appeared in this place, and the village is likely to be attacked by Forest Goblin." Zack village chief immediately spoke with a trembling tone, "No, it's impossible. Orca is still in the village, and the village cannot be attacked. Find the book Garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Orca is the eldest son of Zack village chief and the captain of the village militia." Voltina turned her head and looked at the village chief with golden eyes. Her appearance is very beautiful, but her expression is very cold, with a military iron-blooded aura. Jiang Lu suddenly understood why Vertina was an older female boss. Her temperament at this moment was like steel, with a smell of fresh blood. This is a taste that only those who have experienced the battlefield have. He once read in a book describing war that no matter what training he went through, soldiers who never killed the enemy are always new recruits. Soldiers who have never killed the enemy always carry a sense of fear and fear. Just like a youthful boy, he will feel shy and throbbing when holding his girlfriend's hand for the first time. As time goes by and the number of holding hands increases, this feeling will quickly weaken. Voltina was a knight, a soldier, and now a mercenary. She has killed enemies and strange monsters. When facing enemies and those monsters, she certainly won't be friendly. Her mind will be filled with a strong killing intent, and her face will become cold. This temperament is different from that of ordinary people. Voltina is accustomed to this state, and when she thinks about how to defeat the enemy, she inadvertently reveals a hint of this kind of aura, making her hair stand on end. Even mercenaries who have also killed enemies will be afraid. Because Vertina possesses 83% bravery, her strength is like that of a beast. Mercenaries and soldiers fight year-round, hovering between life and death, and are more sensitive to this smell. They dare not flirt with Captain Vertina, feeling like they will be killed. Jiang Lu thought of the previous battle with Vertina, and Vertina didn't take it seriously. She never showed such a murderous aura from beginning to end.